about teachers having sex with students. Sometimes, as far as I can gather, the age of the teacher matters, the age of the student matters, the age of the teacher doesn't matter, the age of the student doesn't matter. Very complex, didn't quite understand what he was raving about. But it seems as if he was supporting the view that what society says, the morals of society say, if you can't do it, then don't do it. Now, I want to point out to you what I think is an outrageous suspension of that. And I don't want to mention names, even though what I'm about to say is public knowledge. So I think it's unwise in a public park on a Sunday afternoon to start bandying names around.
Why?
But the husband of a current Member of Parliament, when he was young, actually trafficked in heroin. He was a dealer, and he was arrested and tried and sent to jail. So this fellow has spent time in jail for trafficking in heroin. And he's the husband of a current Member of Parliament. You can actually find that out who it is fairly easily. But here's the consequences. That should mean that it is impossible for this man to have any job associated with teaching. He has a criminal record, and that rules him out of quite a lot of jobs, but we're talking about teachers today, so it would rule him out of teaching. So that's the position. This fellow, who you might think is a bit of a scumbag because of his dealing in heroin, in fact has great talents, and he is a born organiser. So great was his talent that he was employed in very high, I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but employed in very high bureaucratic position, first of all in a non-education portfolio, and I won't say whether it's state or federal, so I want to keep this quite blurred, but eventually he was given the job of being a high-up in education. State or federal, I'm not saying, but one of those two, of course. He must have undergone a criminal check. He must have. But it was all to naught. He was allowed to keep this job. Ladies and gentlemen, he was allowed to keep this job in an educational bureaucracy. His job entailed on certain occasions going to schools, being near students, speaking to students. Now, what I'm saying there, I'm not saying, although I have a personal opinion about this, I'm not really saying whether that was a good decision or not. Yeah, nothing is black or white. He did something wrong, he paid his debt, and he had a nice career, still has a nice career actually, as an organiser, as a good bureaucrat. But the laws were suspended for him because of his talents. Okay, so it is possible for the people with power in our society to say, you've paid your debt, you've got talents, we want to use your talents, come aboard. It is strange that for most people that's not possible. If you have a criminal record, you're in trouble. You will have difficulty getting any decent job. You might get a job, well, menial jobs in society, but you will not get any job with a bit of crunch to it. That criminal record will be an albatross round your neck all your life. You have no one to say, you've paid your debt, would you like to do this job? We think you have talents, so we'd like to invite you to come aboard. That doesn't happen with ordinary people. But with this fellow, it did happen. Now, if a teacher is unwise enough, just picture a scenario of a young fellow gets attracted to a student in one of his classes, and let's paint it quite legal. Let's say, or legal in the sense that the student is over 18 and therefore legally is an adult, and this fellow, say, might be 28 and 18. He's in trouble if he gets caught. He can't say, but that student, Mary, is an adult. She's allowed to vote, she's allowed to die for her country, she's allowed to do lots of things, but she's not allowed to have sex with full consent with someone who happens to be her teacher. That's not possible in our society. I'll bet though, and I think this is probably a good thing, that he wouldn't be charged and the thing would be allowed to quietly drop. If he's a public school teacher, state school teacher, he would probably be moved quietly to some other school. Or they're told to cool it until the 18-year-old leaves school. Yeah, it's reasonably complex. But they're not the interesting ones, are they? They're not the interesting ones. You could see rules being bent. Okay, now we've got the 28-year-old teacher, and he really likes the 14-year-old in his Year 8 class. And she is very flattered by his attention, and relationships develop, and they end up going from touchies to, well, all the way. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, what's to be done about that? What is wrong with that? Previously, you don't know it if you're listening to this because earlier the speaker wasn't filmed, but it behoves society, and I'm going to do it on their behalf if I can be so arrogant, to explain what's wrong with a 28-year-old having sex with a 14-year-old, and 28-year-old male and 14-year-old girl. Well, first thing I want to say is I'm rather suspicious of this 28-year-old because I don't know what he can talk about. A teacher, an educated fellow, what he can talk about with a 14-year-old. I think the age gap is huge. There's really nothing to say.
Mr. Speaker, they're having sex, they're not having a conversation.
Yes, but what can they talk about? What's the pillow talk afterwards?
Well, who cares?
Well, I mean, presumably you can't have sex 24 hours a day. I mean, I have tried, but it does not work. Okay?
No, but I'm
tired and need a snack.
Yeah,
okay.
But they're not going to have sex 24 hours a day.
The point about saying what can they talk about is to say the maturity difference is such that they will have very little in common, even if they're the same religion, the same sort of, if I can put it this way, class in society.
Who cares if they want sex with each other?
The point is that suddenly sex is all they've got.
Well,
but the girl,
it's more than I bloody had at that age.
The girl may in fact be dreaming of much more with this fellow. The fellow might be just wanting to get it away with this extraordinarily attractive young 14-year-old. Okay, but she might want much more. That's the difficulty. That's the difficulty, everybody, with relationships like this. They can really quickly become a mismatch in expectations, and the power that the older male has, that he could probably convince the girl to do certain things that she might not otherwise have thought or want, or she can't articulate the objections, becomes a big power play. Now, no sort of relationship should be like that. That's an exploitive relationship. It's a relationship about one person's power over another. So I painted two extremes there. I think the first one, you could probably just forgive the teacher for being a silly fool, and you wouldn't object, like you wouldn't object to this other scenario about the drug dealer, you wouldn't object too strongly. But I think in the other extreme case that you would object, and I think most thinking adults would understand perfectly.